I'm Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. I represent the 9th District of New York, which is Central and South Brooklyn. And this area of the digital divide, broadband, has always been of interest to me because coming from an urban center where you can actually see disparities within one congressional district has made me realize that the role that I play as vice chair of the Committee on Energy and Commerce can be a great equalizer. For a while there, I was one of the few members on the committee who's a Black woman. We now have, I think, at least 2 other women who can bring a unique, diverse, and inclusive view to the work that we're doing at the committee. And it's interesting because even prior to the COVID-19 crisis, we had been really concerned about the fact that within the 9th Congressional District of New York, there were what we call broadband deserts. So the battle for equity has to include, in the 21st century, bridging the digital divide, and I am committed wholeheartedly to accomplishing that goal. What we learned was that some of the most disadvantaged families did not have access to the internet. And so the school system had to really scramble to make sure that they were providing Wi-Fi enabled devices to our children in order for them to do their schoolwork. And that should have never been the case. We also recognize that when people are laid off and furloughed, the cost of actually having broadband in one's home became cost prohibitive. And it has always been cost prohibitive, but it became even more magnified. And we know that being able to access the internet is a lifeline. And so those within our community who were struggling did not have the means to access their internet are still struggling. And we've been able to speak with some of our major carriers here, but again, a discount means nothing when the financial means aren't coming in at all. So one of the things we don't want to see is people go into debt in order to just stay connected, if you will. We have to reimagine what broadband is. And I think there have been long time conversations and debates about whether we consider it an essential utility or not. And I think that the COVID crisis has made it very clear that if you don't have access to broadband, it makes it impossible to do telehealth. And in a district that was the epicenter of the COVID crisis, people who would have gone to their hospitals to get, to deal with chronic illnesses have had to stay home. They needed to be able to connect with a primary care physician. And unfortunately, there were many casualties during the COVID crisis, not directly related to contracting the virus itself. So we know that this is an essential service for many Americans, whether you're living in an urban environment or you're living in a rural environment. The communities that have been hardest hit by this COVID crisis are also the same communities that have struggled with structural inequity and injustice. And I think that as we look at the calls for justice, that's not just a call for a policing strategy that centers humanity. It is also a call for economic justice. And within that context, I think that our utilities, broadband specifically, have been, part of the problem. They've now got to become part of the solution. We already have a program called E-Rate. And I think that E-Rate can be extended to the greater community, particularly those with less means, those with smaller populations. And in so doing, we are really providing all Americans with access to broadband. And I think that that kind of innovative thinking, it has to be put into effect. The profit motive behind broadband has to be re-examined. What does it mean? And what are the ultimate costs of not having broadband in every single household, in every community? It's a tremendous loss of access to income, of access, again, to health, and of access to life. And so I think that when you think, can you put a dollar figure on that? And what does it mean for the next generation to come up with this deficit as part of their lives? It will continue and perpetuate the inequities that we observe now as part of, that have been unearthed as a result of the COVID crisis. And, we've made a commitment, I've made a commitment, that we cannot go back to a pre-COVID existence. We have to use this opportunity to be, again, creative, to look at what role each level of government, whether it's through public service, agencies and entities, or other means, that we have our finger on the pulse, making sure that everyone who needs access to broadband has access to broadband. And if that means providing some sort of a tax abatement or some sort of a tax incentive to our corporate partners, then let's look at ways and means and ways that we can make this available to everyone. And we need to open up more competition in this space so that we can find carriers that will do so. And I think that that type of ultimatum, if you will have these companies step up. Either they will or they won't. And then maybe we can look at, a situation where we do a quasi-governmental partnership. We have public service authorities right now. Maybe those entities can say, listen, we have communities across this state, across the city, that we need to make sure have access to broadband. What can we do to partner with you to make sure that that occurs? Just in my conversations with colleagues, everyone is keenly aware of the inequities that exist. So I think that because it's state by state, we can work on companion legislation like the legislation I've been working with Jerry McNerney on, the Digital Equity Bill, the Digital Equity Act. And that is a game changer. If we can get that done at the state level, now we're holding everyone accountable. We're not begging for something that we don't deserve, or that is a luxury. This is a necessity in the 21st century. People are applying for jobs online. People are receiving goods and services online. People are being fed through access to the internet. Children are getting, their studies online. Our students, whether they're in college, undergrad, everyone have had to really be sure that they can get access to the internet, particularly in the time that we have, the era that we're in right now. We should never be caught flat-footed ever again with respect to the type of inequity that exists across communities in access to the internet. This battle is a battle for 21st century living. And we all have to recognize that we cannot move forward without making sure that every family every community has access to the internet.